It's Wednesday night, and we're live from Oakdale, Washington, in the Educated Touch studio. Welcome to Ethics Outside the Box, with your host, Nathan Nordstrom. Special guests include David Otto and you. Here he is, Nathan Nordstrom.
Well, hello everyone. Thank you so much for stopping by. It is good to have you out with me this wonderful Wednesday night, or whenever you decide to watch this video. We are going to be talking with my dear friend David Otto today. David Otto is one of my favorite massage therapists, which is a hard thing to say for the rest of you, but David really does put some good conversation out there on just about everything: ethics, business, practice, and really excitement of massage therapists. So, David, what is exciting you right now about the massage therapy profession?
Well, in Nevada, we just had a few changes to our law. What excites me is that it gives more opportunity for license holders in different and associated scopes. We're adding reflexologists and structural integration practitioners here in Nevada. So that's pretty exciting, watching our board at work and making sure that it happens and seamlessly is quite the challenge, but that's exciting for me.
That's awesome.
And I think there's a lot of good things happening in the associations around the country, and in my practice, of course. Getting new clients is always pretty exciting. So that's kind of like the bottom line for me. New clients are always exciting.
So full-time practice, correct?
Yes, full-time, 40 plus, 80 plus, 120 plus, I don't know.
Stop only when they tell you have to, huh? Awesome.
That's right.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining me today and participating in this adventure we call Ethics Outside of the Box.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. So we're going to actually go into the standard old follow-through of exactly where do we find the ethics, and how do we actually make sure that we are understanding where ethics, that's not the right thing, and if I don't quickly turn that, yeah. And how do we actually make sure that there we go. All right, so that screen's gone. And hi, Facebook Livers. Thank you for joining us today. And move this back out of my screen. There we go. So the way that we go through and find NCB Code of Ethics. So David, any ideas why I use NCB's Code of Ethics instead of a state or an association?
Well, I think the NCB's been around for a lot of years. I think 21, 22
right
years.
Or so.
And a lot of state laws actually draw from the NCB's Code of Ethics as a standard when they're writing their laws. So, each state has the tweaks of the wording and things like that, but basically it's a good foundation for how our profession has developed in the most recent years. I mean, there are other associations that have had for 75 years now. I know one that's had a code of ethics. And again, they all work together and they're all very similar, if anything. So I think the NCB has a solid, simple, actually, compared to some others, code of ethics.
So yeah, and you'll notice that if you go through a lot of them, you'll notice that they all similarly connect and they all say a lot of the same things, sometimes with slightly different wording. But I wanted to, especially with this series, with these classes, I wanted to be nationally connected. I wanted to make sure that we had a national standard to work with that has a certification or certification behind it. So that is why I used NCB. And yes, there are other connections that I have with NCB and I have with a lot of the associations, but this is a pretty good standard to draw from. So as I go through, remember we go to www.ncbtmb.org, And from the NCB website, you go down to the bottom of any page and you'll see the About section. Scrolling down several, you'll go to Code of Ethics. Once you click on that, you'll come to this page that gives us the Code of Ethics for the National Certification Board. I've been running this for 9 weeks. Here's the 10th week here that we're doing this. So that means that we are actually on number 10, all right, here. And so we're going to go through this and kind of break it down piece by piece just a little bit, but that's going to take us through the rest of the hour because this one's a pretty in-depth one. We've had some like 8 that was pretty small, but still had pretty good content. So number 10 is respect the client's right to treatment with informed and voluntary consent. The certified practitioner will obtain a record that informs, hold on, I'm going to try that again. The certified practitioner will obtain a record, the informed consent of the client or client's advocate before providing treatment. This consent may be written or verbal. Now, I probably screwed that up. Me and reading are not the best of friends, but it's really kind of fun to kind of break this down piece by piece. David, where do you like to start with this one?
Well, there's 2 kinds of consent in the first sentence that I'm seeing, and one is informed and one is voluntary. And I kind of look at informed and voluntary like evidence-based and evidence-informed practice. Because informed to me is not like evidence-informed at all, actually. It's the exact opposite. Informed is a written statement, and it doesn't change, and it's static. So, you know, that's the kind of thing that people are agreeing to when they sign a release or intake form that has some statement at the bottom about their consent and what they're agreeing to. The voluntary consent part is actually an ongoing, it's a very active and dynamic thing to consider every time you apply a stroke. So those 2 to me are they're different in that sense. So one's static and one's dynamic. But you have to pay attention to the dynamic one all the time, every moment.
So I like that you pull out voluntary as kind of that variable, because how many times have we seen a client and at the very beginning they're all gung-ho, ready for the massage, and then you start getting into a spot and they go, ah. Do you respond and get consent to continue versus do you just push on through?
Absolutely.
And that's,
I totally agree.
Yeah, and that's that voluntary aspect where, and who's volunteering? Obviously, the massage therapist is there. I mean, it's not.
They have an agenda. They have a plan. Yeah.
You've got a purpose. You've got an outline. You've got a treatment plan organized. You kind of have structured the session. But if anything changes, you need to be conscious of making sure that they are still informed and still consent to continuing treatment. So yeah, I love that when we look at informed. Now, I also look at informed in a different way. Because you've got the informed aspect of written documentation. This is what it says. You know what it says, and you sign on the bottom line to say, yes, I am informed on this. But if the massage therapist isn't informed on best practices, then that could be a problem as well. If a massage therapist was trained in massage school, not that massage schools ever put questionably statements out there, but some teachers might not teach the full depth of what they're supposed to do. And the instructor says, hey, you know, you should do some deep tissue and really jam in there. And if they squirm and they're wandering about, then you just deal with it and just keep pushing. Or
right,
the
so
one that
it's almost like you're coercing your client when they've withdrawn that voluntary consent at that moment of that stroke, that deep stroke you're just talking about. I think if they're coerced, or if they're ill-informed, let's put it that way, they may get the wrong information, and then consent beyond what is the norm for a massage practice. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. It's important for massage therapists to create the best informed ability that they can, and to improve as they go, so that it can stay voluntary, so that there's less flexibility during the session, so that there's less problematic. If a good massage therapist is assessing the tissue as they go along, a lot of times they won't have the problems that are out there in other ways. So, a little buzz there for some odd reason. So I wanted to then go into the next piece, which is the certified practitioner will obtain and record the informed consent of the client. So I like this because it's not just saying, yeah, get consent and move on. It's obtaining the consent, recording the intent, and making sure that it's of the client or their advocate. So there's a challenge. Client versus client advocate. That could be any number of people. The most common probably is children. That would also be another group to be concerned about and be working with, is if you have a person who's mute, you actually do want to have an advocate or something for them to show that's too much, or some ability to communicate in a different way. I hadn't really directly connected to that until David couldn't speak, but I think my most common has been children. Now there's other groups that I can connect with. One is foreign language. I've had people come in who didn't speak English, and they had a translator for them. And so being able to confirm with them an understanding and an expectation. On to number 10, so we've talked about respect the client's right to treat with informed and voluntary consent. Next, moving on, the certified practitioner will obtain and record the informed consent of the client. So there are several different ways that we can obtain and record this. One is obviously the verbal obtaining, the written obtaining. If you write it down, not only getting that piece of paper, but maintaining and holding on to that piece of paper. But that second piece is recording. What happens when someone comes back, David? When you have a client who you've seen 2, 3, 4, 20, 30, 40 times, how do you obtain and record consent for that client?
Well, I use the original intake form as their consent. As far as I know, it doesn't expire unless they rescind it, which would need to be in writing or verbally. I mean, if they say, no, I don't want to massage from you today, I go, well, thanks, have a great day, and I leave.
Awesome. Yeah.
I think that the verbal part is really kind of, it's hard to interpret sometimes, especially in a court of law, what verbal, the impact of verbal has, or what legally verbal consent holds for a client, for a therapist, to be able to assist a client. And okay, so I was thinking, okay, in my practice, I have a mobile practice. I go to people's homes.
Mm-hmm.
So just like a vampire, if you invite me in, I have total reign. Right?
Like
I mean,
vampire. Okay.
Yeah. If you invite me in, that is the first form of consent. The second one, in my opinion, and in my practice, is when you get on my table, prepared to receive a massage, especially if there's oil involved, because there's some degree of disrobe that my client is in. They're waiting for me to start the massage. So I have a choice to make. I can either read their body language. If they're not letting the sheet be removed to expose the area that I'm going to be working on. That's one sign, obviously. It's nonverbal, actually, but it's not written either.
True.
There's the, we were talking earlier about the depth of the stroke. So they're splinting against my stroke or tightening up or saying something to indicate that they're not quite comfortable with it, with the stroke. And I ask every time. It doesn't matter who I have. If I have somebody that wants deep tissue all the time and they're giving me the groans, that it may be a little too deep, I always ask. And I lighten up, then I ask. So that consent, the verbal is still, it's an ongoing thing. That's the dynamic thing I was talking about earlier. But in my practice, I just rely on the intake form that I originally had them sign. Now, if you're in an office, you have that signed in every time somebody comes in, especially if you're working with other practitioners, right?
Correct.
So every time they sign in, they should be signing a consent form. In an event massage situation where you're going through people every 10 minutes, it's a little harder to manage. I always require, if I'm working for a company as their contractor, I require that I have a sign-in sheet, and there's a release form at the bottom and a consent form. So the release and the consent are actually two different things on my form. The release is that they won't hold me harmless or the company that I'm working with for anything that might happen to them today, which, as we both know, doesn't hold water in court at all. It just makes the client aware that there are considerations for what they're about to receive, which is, you might have some bruising afterwards. If you're not used to massage and you've never had one before, you might have a bruise. And that's just part of the work. Now, that's part of our informed consent, I think, is to let them know that it's hard to tell each person that getting in my chair for a 10-minute massage, that's what's going on. So that's why I have it written. And the release, the informed consent is just that too. It's not chiropractic. It's, we don't diagnose this kind of informed consent thing. It's just for relaxation purposes only. In that environment, it can't be anything more specific in a 10-minute session than that.
So you brought something up that I wasn't going to bring up till later, but the non-verbal communication and the concept that there's problems with. Actually, hold on. I'm going to see if I can change that. That might change. There you go. There's this nonverbal communication as an informed consent model, as a piece for that. Oh, okay, yeah, you're catching me. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. So it's this piece that goes through of, well, they didn't actually say it, but they gave me consent to work on their hips because they weren't wearing underwear. And people will say that that's nonverbal and that it's implied, and implied causes a real big legal issue when we don't say, hey, verbally I checked in and I confirmed.
Right, that's the informed consent part. I mean, you have to explain prior to the session what's going to happen during the session. This is critical for, especially in an employment situation where if the client is not used to your undraping the glutes to work on them directly, that they need to know that's what you're going to do. And you need to tell everybody that.
Period.
Yeah, period. And I don't tell my repeat clients that. I tell them that the first time I see them.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I mean, that's their voluntary consent each time after that. They know they rely on what's going to happen in the session. If I change up and do something weird or stupid, I need to tell them before I do it. So if I do cranial during one of my sessions, I need to tell them I'm going to do cranial on you because I think it'll help your migraine or whatever comes up. You know, if I'm doing something different, because I have a lot of maintenance massage clients. You know, they get it for reasons of flexibility and stamina and energy. It's not always, you know, very condition specific or consideration heavy that I'm doing massage for them. You know, they have areas.
I love that statement that you gave there, that it was informed at the beginning and given, and then as you go through, you're maintaining that consent. Now, I don't doubt, even if you have a client who you're seeing twice a month, after a couple of years, they know what to expect. There's no question. But if the condition changes, for example, they throw their back out or they hurt their hip, I'm assuming that you would then get consent again because the condition has changed. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. Because my MO has changed. The purpose for the massage has changed. The area that I'm going to be working on with specific techniques has changed. So I need to tell them what the techniques are I'm going to be using to address their concern.
I had a person who took a continuing education class with me a couple of years ago who sent me an email about 3 weeks after, and she let me know. She said, you know, I started doing the things that you showed me in class on my clients, and I had one person who was mad. And she said, I started doing some more stretching and more movement and started working on this muscle, and they didn't expect it, and I didn't talk to them about it. I didn't get informed consent, and they didn't realize or connect that as an important piece. And so, yeah, so going to a new continuing education class and deciding that you're going to bring that into your practice requires that you get informed consent, so that you can let that client know that you're doing something new, something different, and they may say, I don't want you to try that stuff on me. And that's when you have to mentally go back and say, okay, so this is what I'm going to do. This is how I do it. And I can remember those organizational pieces of what makes me good.
Yeah. So when I went through school, so many years ago, I learned structural integration as a technique. And if anybody is familiar with structural integration, it is very specific.
Yeah.
There are start and end points. You really have to know your anatomy, and there's depth of stroke and you know, the practitioner's application of it and good body mechanics and all this stuff, right? There's a lot to go with it, and that deserves a class to learn that.
Absolutely.
But what the client deserves from you learning that and getting good at it and being effective with it. See, that's the thing I'm getting at, is that a lot of people that take structural integration love it. It's like, I can't do a whole, you know, structural integration session of 60 minutes or more. It just kills my joints, my knuckles. I mean, that's just me, right? There are therapists that's all they practice, right? Structural integration. Awesome. Rolfers, yes. But you do not want to pull that out on a client in the middle of the session or at the end of the session when they're supine and you want to work on their pecs, right?
Yeah.
You got to tell them.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got to tell them, and you got to tell them it's going to go very deep, and you need to open the communications at that point, because if they're at this point, you know they're going to be in la la land. You can expect that communication to be opened. Either you open it or they open it, and you certainly want you to open it first.
Yeah.
So I don't think I used it, but my client afterwards asked me, "Did you just use Reiki on me?" I'm like, no, not that I'm aware of, but
Not intentionally.
Right, not intentionally, but he was familiar with Reiki, and I must have done a hand placement or, you know, waited, I don't know what the hold is, 2 minutes or something, you know, in a certain position. I didn't intend to So it wasn't a miscommunication. He was just curious, and I explained to him that I know some Reiki. I don't practice it intentionally, but there are some hand positions that I use that that resemble that, especially towards the end of the massage. I was flattered because he apparently felt something from it, but maybe it was just my intent as a massage therapist and closing off the session and grounding and things like that was being projected. It was being interpreted through my hand position. So.
Well, and I love that we go both directions. We go from the ultra deep treatment-based work to the ultimate light energy type work.
Yeah.
And really, it's consent on both sides. It's getting informed consent to use any type of treatment that you're going to change from. I have a pretty standard statement of, all right, so you haven't been in to see me before. I'm a different massage therapist than what you've probably usually already seen. So there's some things that I do that are more pressure resistant and kind of posture sensitive. So we'll be doing a lot more, and I go into the explanation of what I do so that when someone who's never seen me before, doesn't know who Nathan Nordstrom is, sometimes they're referred by someone who's already seen me and go, oh, no. Tim came in, he saw you, and he said, you're going to do exactly what I like. Well, that's okay. Wonderful. I will connect and express to you what it is that I do so that I feel comfortable that I've communicated, because Tim may have a whole different way of communicating. Let's just keep it all
perception.
Yeah, and perception.
Yeah.
I've had clients who really love that deep tissue, really getting in there and spreading things up and really pouring on the pressure. And they send clients in and go, oh, this is the deepest massage you'll ever receive. Okay. I haven't done a handstand on anybody yet, but I will balance it. And my favorite, I have to say, are husbands and wives. Getting an informed consent from a wife and getting informed consent from her husband.
Yeah.
Those are two different people, and they're going to have two different experiences completely. Yep. Because their expectations different and their desires different, and what they actually are asking for is different.
You nailed it right there with that word, expectation. And so going back to the code of ethics, the NCB's verbiage or their content there is meant to be, it's a professional standard, a professional code that we follow. It's put in a professional sense. If you were to take this same phrase, informed consent, and you put it in a customer service sense, you're talking about meeting expectations, okay? Because there's nothing worse than a new client never calling you back. You want to know why? Because you didn't do this simultaneous thing that all good companies do. They set your expectations. In fact, if they're any good, they're going to promise you little and deliver more, right? So what you do in the informed consent is you promise more and you deliver more, because you have to actually deliver what you promise. So if you are doing exactly what you say, okay, let's take, for example, abdominal massage. Now, this is a topic that is not quite as risque as glute massage, so it's not as glamorous, right? There are therapists.
It's not as glamorous.
Right.
Okay.
In the discussion.
Glute massage is glamorous.
Well, it's more exciting to talk about glutes than it is abdomens.
Okay, yep.
Yeah. So, because, abdomens have so many more connotations. You could be pregnant, you could have IBS, you could have ovarian cysts, there are so many considerations with abdominal massage. Glutes are just totally always sexualized whenever they're talked about by a client, right? Not always, but you know what I mean.
Defined as butt. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, butt. Yeah.
Are you going to rub my butt?
Oh, I'll massage your glutes. Don't worry.
Yep.
No, but so when we talk about abdominal massage, they're on both sides of the fence. Let's talk about it from a therapist standpoint. therapists are either taught to or not to work on the abdomen.
And in their work
Employers-
environment, they may or may not.
Right. Right. So, and there are employers that either do or do not allow abdominal massage to actually happen. Either they have it not written, or in the policies exclusively, or particularly excluded
Correct.
from from practice, or it's required. This is the protocol we want you to follow. It includes abdominal massage. I hope you're trained in it, because that's why we hired you, because you did it, right?
Yep. Sure.
Right. Especially, but this abdominal massage is probably more sensitive than the glutes are, I think, in any client's perspective. You can work on my glutes all you want, right? Because they're part of my leg, and I can definitely feel a difference in my lower back after you work on my glutes. There's no question about that. I mean,
Absolutely.
every experiences that. But when you turn me over, and now you have to breast straight me, or you're gonna like expose my entire upper body. For males, that includes breasts, and that's always a debatable issue too. Should you cover a male's breasts like you do female breasts? I don't know the answer to that one. However, whatever you decide to do, you have to tell your client that's what you're gonna do. Because if you don't tell them you're gonna work on the abdomen, and you work on the abdomen, you'll never get a call back if they'd never thought you were gonna work on their abdomen. They'll be surprised. And they'll question whether they want to call you back or not, because you didn't tell them. Not because you did it, because you didn't tell them and you took them by surprise.
And that's the informed consent as well.
Yep.
If
When I
you
work
don't-
on abdomens, go ahead.
If you don't preemptively prepare someone for that recognition of what to expect for that hour, then even if you're halfway through the session and say, hey, could I work on this because this is what's going on? They already feel that power differential because they're undressed on a table, and now you're offering something, and they expect that you are the professional and you're supposed to know what you're doing. Power differential doesn't happen until they're on the table in most cases.
Right. There is an argument for not on the table. Okay, let's take. I totally agree with you on the table thing. You cannot do it while you just turn them over and they're in like this haze, and now you're suggesting abdominal massage and they don't know what to do. You're right about that. Okay, but for somebody that has never had abdominal massage before, talking with the therapist, giving them informed consent about the benefits, right? Because the benefits go with whatever you're informing them you're going to do operationally. And hopefully you did that in your marketing prior to them even getting on the table, or in that interview, that interview that you did with them on the phone when they called you to book the appointment, or when you met them in the lobby, in the waiting area, wherever it is before you get in that room, benefits should be, but you should probably not do benefits in the room. I mean, that's just, informed consent starts way before you leave that room so they can disrobe and get on the table, I think.
Correct. So I owned a spa years ago, and I noticed that we had a huge number of massage therapists as they were going in. We actually had it set up that not only did you have the written consent that they would sign in and say that they're here for their massage session, but they also had verbal consent. And so at the beginning of each session, a therapist would say, how you doing today? Wonderful. What's going on? Perfect. A full body massage includes head, neck, shoulders, chest, or upper chest, back, abdomen, hips, or glutes, legs, legs, feet, and hands. Are you comfortable with all of those?
Yep.
And they would say yes, or I don't really want my.
Yep. Exactly.
The problems come, because there are problems here, but the problems come when you start doing the autopilot on that processing, and you get a client in and you're like, okay, come on in. Are we changing anything? Same as that? Okay, head, neck, face, shoulders, to back and feet. Perfect. All right, we're going to go. If that's a first-time client, you didn't get consent. You autopiloted it the whole way, and they're going to know. Oh, that?
This is another topic a little bit, but communicating with your clients effectively is like watching their nonverbal cues. Like, are they glazed over? Are they not listening to you? Are they disrobing while you're telling them this? This making eye contact and assuring that you have a connection with them on this part. This informed consent is really important. I do want to put a plug out there for autopilot, though. And I'm going to tell you why. Autopilot can be a good thing because, and please correct me if I'm wrong, when you go to court after somebody claims that you didn't do something during the treatment, like give them informed consent, when you go to court and you say, I say that to every client, and the court goes, well, how can you prove that? And you say,
massage includes head, neck, face, shoulders, back, lower back, feet, hips, hands, and legs.
That'll start the conversation, right? But then you can also say, you can pull my last 100 clients, and I'll bet you 50% of them will remember 100% of the time that that's exactly what I said. So having a habit, in my opinion, is a good thing when it comes to informed consent. If you have a spiel that you say every time, when, the glaze part, yeah, you want to get rid of the glaze part. You want to make that connection with your client when you're saying it to each and every client, each and every time. Because you have to see if this time they don't want their glutes or their abdomen worked on,
We have
you don't
such
know
a
what's
good argument. That is such a good argument because it almost turns into a jingle in some cases. And because you've got a cadence going, you just going through it. Another similar statement is undress to your level of comfort and lay face down on the table. Massage therapists say that and say that and say that and say that and say that. And so when someone asks, well, did you tell them to take off their underpants? No, I said undress to their level of comfort because that's what every massage therapist says across this nation. Because that's how we talk.
And that's what that particular therapist said too. And that's one good thing about autopilot is that you have a professional identity. And if you have integrity, you will say pretty much the same thing every time. Now, I personally find a different way to say it. So it kind of catches them off guard a little bit. Like, they know that I will ask them and I know that sometimes they in their head, they're going, Dave, you ask me this every time. Do you have to ask me this every time? You know what I mean? They're saying this in their head, but they know that's my job. And I think that will prevail in most cases with a client that might get frustrated with you because you see them every week, for example, and you ask them every time, is there anything specific I can work on today? Do you have any concerns today that you want me to address? So how is your workout at the gym? And then trying to get information from them through a personal channel, but then focusing on, so do you want me to work on your low back today? Kind of thing, like really prompting them, not guiding them, but sometimes, asking the same question every time, they go, yeah, the usual, what you did last time. And they start to come out with different ways to say it too. And realize that I think this is part of what we do. When it's the one time out of 20 that they do actually say, no, don't work on my abdomen today. That you don't even have to ask a question. You just adhere to what they just said for this session. So
what I'm getting from you is make it a conscious effort. Even though it's on autopilot, throwing something in just a little different makes them go, yeah, that'd be good.
Open-ended questions are the best way to cure boredom with your rote script or your autopilot. Open-ended questions.
I tell people I never do the same massage twice.
That too. What happened with the last session? Can you go back to that last session and say, so how did your headache go away, the next day? Did you get a good night's sleep? Did you like the techniques I used? Do you want me to use them again today? I know you had a doctor's appointment. Is there anything I need to, do you need to update your intake form? and that's where my notes go, right? You know, and so I can adjust my technique and maybe what I suggest today based on that conversation, and that's open-ended in a sense. It's not like I'm giving them a checklist to uncheck one or check more. You know what I mean?
So you kind of brought up court of law a few moments ago, and about how your routine and your autopilot can help you in a court of law. I had an interesting argument from one of the attorneys as I was on the stand. He said, "How do you know that this client gave consent to treatment?" And so I went to the two pieces. They have a health history form and that there was a verbal intake. Well, how do you know there was a verbal intake? That there's a chart note written about the session after the session. Well, how do you know that was this person? How do you know that session actually happened? And how do you know that he did what he says he did? And there's only so much you can argue. You can say, okay, so when a person comes in and I write out a document, why would I at that point falsify a document to write something that I didn't do? What would be the benefit in writing up notes that never happened? And so being able to really draw to understand that informed consent is both the written health history, that they've actually come in, that they've actually decided to lay on your table, that they've actually paid for the session. These are all pieces that give us consent. But the informed consent really comes to that discussion with them and informing them, hey, you're talking about you've got shoulders and neck pain. I'm going to do a little bit of stretching. Is that okay? Perfect. We're going to do some PNF stretching. If they have no clue what PNF stretching is, then you should talk to them about it and connect with them and express to them and ask them, let me know if you feel a stretch or if there's any pain, because I will know to back off if there's pain. I don't want to hurt you. I want you to feel better from this. These are those little pieces of communication that can really make you a better therapist and can break you if you are not doing informed consent. If you're not getting the right communication, it can really destroy you as a therapist.
That's right. I think employers really help massage therapists with that informed consent piece. The voluntary consent, though, is totally within our responsibility on a second-to-second basis. But that you were talking about before was there's only a certain point you can argue to, and that is the ability to read minds.
Yeah.
If your client in their head is going, ow, 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 stop, but they don't say anything, that's one thing that I think a therapist cannot avoid, is that non-communication. Miscommunication, I mean, there's other ways to tell, right? Breathing rate, splinting against the stroke. These are all nonverbal forms. And you know, you've got to be proactive to try and read their mind in order to get that voluntary consent on every step.
I think there's something that you can do, though, and that's client empowerment. Before the session starts, you say, hey, we're going to be starting the session at any time. If you're feeling I'm pressing too hard, if it feels like it's too much, I want you to be able to tell me, because this is a team effort. I'm here to help you feel better, but I can't do my best without understanding if you are feeling too much pressure. If you're feeling an ow, let me know, and we can balance it out to make sure that it works so you can recover.
Absolutely.
And really making sure that your clients are empowered is going to give you a world of benefit. If you haven't told your client once, hey, let's work together on this, you let me know, and if it's too much, and I'll back off, or if you need more pressure, let me know and I'll push in. But we need to be on the same team, and empowering that client is huge for that informed consent. We've already talked about this a little bit, but the statement before providing treatment is when I first read it, I was like, okay, it's before the session starts. I understand that. I get that. However, is it only before the session starts? I don't think so. I think it's anytime you're going to deviate from your treatment plan that was created and agreed upon between you and your client, you need to then get informed consent. I don't think I could say that twice exactly the same way, but that is absolutely
perfectly.
Yeah, it is. If you've created a treatment plan, and you should create a treatment plan before you start touching a client, and receive consent to work on the client with that treatment plan, as soon as something changes, anything, if so many of my favorite stories start with me getting informed consent and then going in and something bizarre happened. And I went, I'm not going to be working on you. A client who came in 3 weeks post emergency quadruple bypass surgery. Didn't tell me. I asked, has anything changed in your health history? What's going on? What are we working on? Oh, my back's real tight. And so started him face down, worked on his multifidi and rotatori, those little tiny muscles on around the erector spinae group. And I was like, I have never felt muscles this tight like this. And he rolled over and he had a zipper all the way down his chest. Scared the snot out of me. And now I had to say, well, we need to change the treatment plan, which means the session's over. We have to figure this out, because here's now that new informed consent of this doesn't work for us.
This is a scary part of what we do. You know, we always think we have the power, but sometimes our clients, I think, they have the power. They can put us in a position where we're not practicing safely. You know, and all these ethics and standards and laws are designed to protect them, and we have to be also aware of how they affect, our clients affect us. Because if you did damage while in that space of time where you weren't aware, that's going to be a really tough court case. You know,
absolutely.
Proving that the client didn't tell you, I can see a lawyer taking that position, right? I mean, because that would be your defense, is the client didn't tell me, so I didn't know. I had a client one time who I did a shiatsu session on, entirely shiatsu.
Okay.
This was a long time ago, and I found out years later, after seeing her for other modalities, subsequent to that shiatsu session, she finally felt comfortable enough to tell me that during that shiatsu session, she had bruises where my thumbs were.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh, well, maybe you haven't seen the doctor yet, but you could have some, you know, blood issues or, you know, edema or, you know,
generalized problems.
Right. Some level of health condition caused that to happen. And she said it was a lot of pressure, but she didn't mind it at the time. But she got bruises. And, you know, usually when people see bruises, it's like somebody had to really do some heavy work there, you know, almost on the border of contusion, you know, like, well, it is a contusion, but I mean, like, you usually associate that with negative things, right? Bruises. Yep. I hate for her to go in and talk to her friends at work about my shiatsu session, and then, you know, they know that what I did caused that, but she never said anything. And I didn't know, and she didn't know, she may have had a condition that caused that bruising to happen. So years later, she finally told me, and I don't know what I could have done to defend against that. You know, if she said she had edema, you know, if it was subacute, you know, or chronic edema at the time, I don't know, even 3 years ago, she doesn't know what kind of health she was in. So
I love that you draw this perspective that the client has the power here, because the easy statement is, as massage therapists, we're in the business of touch therapy, we can tie all these things that we are in the business of, but I think really the biggest thing that we are in the business of is trust.
Couldn't agree more.
We trust our clients to inform us. We trust that our people who come in asking for what they're asking for actually want that. We trust that our clients are psychologically balanced enough to not have a perception that we're doing something inappropriate or wrong from what we actually have informed them of. We trust that our clients will let us know if there's something too much, too little. We trust that our clients, after they leave, will be able to give a good expectation of what our skills are to their friends and neighbors. We have a lot of trust built into the people that we see.
Yep, we take a lot of risks.
And let's go on the other side, because these people trust us. They are willing to go into a closed room that's dark with some creepy music playing, get naked and get on a table under a sheet, and let us touch them for an hour. There's huge trust there.
Absolutely.
So how do you make sure that you do not defile their trust? Really comes back in some portions to this, and there's other things with the communication and making sure that you've got boundaries, and we'll definitely talk about all that as we go through this this series. But right now, it's that informed consent, so that they know, yes, I'm taking off my clothes and getting under a sheet, but I have an idea that you know what you're doing, and you have asked me if it's okay to do this, and I've told you it's okay. If you vary from it, if you change your treatment plan, then I'm going to start feeling uncomfortable. And so keeping that informed consent is life-altering.
Yep. And being that you're an anatomy geek, Nathan, I know this about you. You know, that communication is really important, and being overly descriptive of what you're going to do is not a bad thing, unless, of course, it cuts into their massage time. So if you're managing your time wisely, you have a script, you've practiced this. Obviously, we all went to school for a number of hours, and that's part of learning a modality. Say you're taking a CE course on a new modality. You really got to practice speaking about it effectively and completely, so that your client that you're going to try it on, and you're going to tell them you're going to try it on them at first. I just learned this stroke, and it's based in what I know, but this has a different effect, you know, depending on how I'm going to use it. I want to use this on you. Do you consent? You know, this, like sneaking stuff in.
Give me feedback on this as well, because it's consent, and I'm trying something new, and so they kind of go, I'm scared, and you say, could you help me make sure that I'm doing it right to your comfort?
Right. Well, and before you even try it on them, you tell them about the class you're going to next weekend. You know what I mean? You're preparing them by informing them of what opportunities they have or they will have. I mean, engaging your client in your practice is really important to keeping that level of consent going, verbally and written. You know what I mean? Like it's mostly verbal after you've had your client for a number of sessions at least. And I'm not talking about time, I'm talking about a number of sessions. Because I see some people once a year, but they know what to expect from me. And if I do anything different, they need to know what's going on. You know, and we're all at different levels. Anybody watching this who's a massage therapist, if you're a student, if you're a 20-year veteran, we all have the same considerations for this code, this particular number 10.
Absolutely. So there's one other thing that I have to toss into the code number 10. And that is that it's not just informed consent, it's professional informed consent. When you talk in a professional way, the communication with which you have is going to say a lot more than just what you do. When a person is getting ready to get on a massage table and you say, I'm gonna rub you, I hear your back hurts, hope it makes it feel better, Could you lay down on your butt down? That client is going to go, have you had any schooling for this? Do you know what you're talking about? Should I trust you? But if you say, hi, how are you? Let's talk about your conditions. So there are certain muscles that it sounds like you've got some dysfunction with. And I'd really like to not only engage stretch, but engage these techniques to really help you feel better. Are you okay with that? Would that be great? Perfect. So if we could have you lay supine or on your back, undress to your level of comfort, because you know what, every client has now been trained for that. Undress to your level of comfort, have the sheet right on top of you. I'll knock to come back in. Let me know if you're ready.
You know what's something really interesting is that I don't know a way you can do. You could have a written test about this. Like pick the best phrase to tell your client to get naked, A, B, C, or D, and then you pick the most professional one. I mean,
ooh. You know, that could be a Facebook poll. I'm going to do that, and I want all of y'all to like it or share it so that we can actually see what the biggest connections are and what people say. Because I think you're right. I think there is something.
Yeah, it's not even scholarly. You know, it has to do with also who your client is.
Absolutely.
You could say what you said the first time to somebody, and because you're wearing a white lab coat and you've sanitized everything in the room, they already trust you, and they didn't really hear what you just said. So, you know, there are elements to what people trust as to how they respond as well. I think
that goes to the point that you said about mixing it up a little bit and asking open-ended questions instead of, are you comfortable with that? Yes. No. Okay. Right. Move on. No, it's, does that work for you, or are there specific things that you want me to work on more?
Yeah. I have a runner client, and he said, you know, I just trained for my long run, and I'm so ready for this massage. Period. That's all he said. And lucky for him, I also run. And I said, and I know he has arthritis in his foot. I said, can I grind into your calves today? And I say it just like that. And he knows exactly what I mean. You know, when I first did it, it was structural integration. Now, he says yes or no based on the flare-up in his foot. And, you know, you and I know that some level of calf work will assist with the flexion of his foot, right?
Yep.
But it's his decision. And when I say grind, I mean I'm going deep today. I'm going super deep, and he knows it. Well, and he will say yes, or you know, don't go so deep, but yeah, I need some work on my calves. Like he'll tell me what he wants me to do, and I don't mind that at all. I just put it in a little fun way with him because he gets it.
You've heard the term tech talk, right?
Tech talk, yeah.
Yeah, so there is some aspects of technical terminology that you would use with a repeat clientele to understand what you're going to be doing, and you're going to have different tech talk in golfing than you would in sports massage. You would have different technical terminology for if you're a proctologist than if you're a dentist. I would hope. I don't know. I'm not.
Orifice is a common theme there.
Yeah. One's an in, one's an out. So, thank you, David, for joining me for this hour. Any add-ons you want to toss in before we say goodbye to our friends?
I really think that we nailed a lot of the areas that may be of concern, or at least come up in discussions. I thank you so much for having me. It's always fun talking ethics with you, and thank you for the number 10, X, right?
Number 10, you're the big X. Yes. No, I appreciate you joining me and having so much fun. It's always good to hang out with you. We're gonna be hanging out the end of this week and having more fun. I think I'm gonna be pulling out my video camera quite a bit and having us do some video back and forth and some of that kind of fun stuff once in a while. Hopefully I'll be able to edit it all up and get it going this weekend, but we will see how that all works. And other than that, enjoy yourself.
It was nice to meet you, David Otto. Thank you, Nathan. The hour has flown by. We hope you've enjoyed this discussion with Ethics Outside the Box. As you've seen, Nathan uses many second-hand stories of ethical situations. If you'd like to share your story or you have any questions, feel free to contact him and Nathan at educatedtouch.com. If you'd like to register for next week's live webinar, go to shop.educatedtouch.com. Under live webinars, you will see all upcoming webinars. If you have just watched this video and would like continuing education for home study, you can go to shop.educatedtouch.com under the home study options with the date or episode number to receive your exam. If you would please like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, we will keep you up to date on new videos. If you'd like to attend one of our live courses, you can find upcoming scheduled events at www.educatedtouch.com. Thank you for joining us today. Be well and have an ethical day.